Somewhere in a dark, damp crevice, a snake that has killed dozens of times in its life is about to lose a fight it never saw coming. Its opponent isn't another snake, a bird of prey, or a hungry mammal. It's an arthropod you could hold in your palm, armed with a pair of hollow claws and a venom cocktail built to shut down a nervous system in minutes. By the time this battle ends, the snake will be wrapped, pierced, and drained, and the animal responsible will simply walk away to hunt again tomorrow. This isn't a rare fluke caught once on camera. It's a pattern researchers have now documented across 3 continents, and it's forcing biologists to rewrite what they thought they knew about who really rules the food chain. For most of us, snakes sit near the top of the reptile world's most feared list. They swallow rodents whole, ambush birds mid-flight, and in some cases even eat other snakes. Very few animals are brave enough or well-armed enough to hunt a snake and win. So when field researchers began reporting a giant centipede locked around a snake's body, injecting venom while the snake thrashed helplessly, the story sounded almost impossible. Yet the reports kept coming, first from forests of Southeast Asia, then from caves in South America, then from a windswept island in the South Pacific. Each case involved the same basic weapon, an ancient, many-legged hunter that evolution had quietly turned into one of the most efficient reptile killers on the planet. Giant centipedes are not new to science. They've been crawling through leaf litter and rotting logs for hundreds of millions of years, long before snakes even existed. For most of that time, people assumed they were opportunistic insect hunters, content to grab beetles, crickets, and the occasional frog. That assumption is now falling apart. Field biologists working in tropical regions have filmed centipedes coiling around live snakes, holding on through violent struggles, and ultimately killing prey many times their own body weight. What makes this especially strange is that these aren't isolated, lucky strikes. The behavior shows up again and again in different centipede species in different corners of the world, suggesting this is a well-practiced hunting strategy rather than a one-off accident. To understand why this matters, it helps to remember how food chains are usually drawn. Insects and other small invertebrates typically sit near the bottom, providing meals for lizards, birds, and yes, snakes. Snakes are supposed to be several rungs higher, feeding on those smaller creatures and occasionally on each other. A centipede successfully killing a snake doesn't just add one new predator-prey relationship to the chart. It skips several steps entirely, turning what should be prey into a predator capable of taking down something well above its expected rank. That kind of reversal doesn't happen often in nature, and when it does, scientists pay close attention. The secret to how these centipedes pull this off lies in their front legs, or more precisely, in what those front legs have become. Near the head of a giant centipede sits a pair of curved, claw-like structures called forcipules. At a glance, they look like fangs, but they aren't teeth or mouthparts at all. They're modified walking legs that evolution has reshaped into venom-injecting weapons over millions of years. Nothing else in the animal kingdom has pulled off quite the same trick, turning limbs meant for movement into a syringe capable of dropping prey many times the centipede size. The forcipules are short, thick, and strong enough to punch through skin, and they're connected to venom glands that pump a complex chemical mixture straight into the wound. What makes a centipede's attack so different from a typical predator strike is the combination of grip and repetition. Instead of delivering one fast, fatal bite, the centipede wraps its long, segmented body around its target, using dozens of legs to anchor itself at multiple points along the length of the snake. This isn't a single hold, it's many simultaneous holds, and that changes everything about the fight. A snake can twist, whip its tail, and try to bite back, but the centipede simply moves with it, tightening its grip and stabbing repeatedly with its forcipules as the struggle continues. Every strike delivers another dose of venom, and over time, that steady chemical assault does what brute force alone rarely could. This tactic exploits something specific about snake anatomy. Almost everything a snake relies on for offense and defense, its eyes, its fangs, its jaws, is packed into the front of its body. That design works brilliantly against threats approaching from the front, but it becomes a serious weakness when an attacker locks onto the snake's midsection or tail instead. Once a centipede has secured its grip along the body, the snake's head becomes almost useless. It can't easily bend back far enough to strike at an attacker gripping its own length, and every twist or lunge just shifts the fight without loosening the hold. The snake's greatest weapon becomes irrelevant the moment the battle moves away from its head. Timing makes the odds even worse for the snake. Researchers have noted that many of these attacks happen when snakes are least able to defend themselves, such as during shedding, when a layer of fluid builds up beneath the old skin and blurs the snake's vision. A snake that can't see clearly can't track a fast-moving, multi-legged attacker circling its body, and a few seconds of confusion is often all a centipede needs to lock in. Some snakes, in the chaos of the fight, have even been observed biting at their own bodies by mistake, adding injury on top of injury as the venom continues to spread. None of this means every snake is equally at risk. Size plays a major role in determining who wins these encounters. Very large snakes, the kind that can grow beyond the reach of any centipede's grip, are largely safe from this type of attack simply because they can't be fully wrapped. It's small and medium-sized snakes that face the real danger, since their proportions allow a centipede to coil around a significant portion of their body length. In a strange way, being a smaller, more agile snake, usually an advantage, becomes a liability against this particular predator. The clearest documented cases of centipedes killing snakes come from tropical forests in Southeast Asia, where researchers have recorded multiple encounters between local centipede species and small to medium snakes. In these accounts, the pattern is remarkably consistent. The centipede secures its hold. The snake struggles violently for a period that can stretch for several minutes, and the outcome is almost always the same. The venom, combined with the physical exhaustion of a prolonged fight, overwhelms the snake's system before it can break free. What might look like an unfair fight, on paper turns out to be a battle the centipede is extremely well equipped to win. But snakes aren't the only unlikely victims. In the limestone caves of Venezuela, researchers studying local wildlife found something that seemed almost too strange to be real: giant centipedes climbing cave walls to hunt bats. Some of these centipedes stretch past 12 inches in length, an intimidating size even before you consider how they use it. They position themselves upside down or sideways on the ceiling, anchoring their rear legs firmly into cracks in the rock, while leaving their front half free to strike at bats flying past or resting nearby. When a bat gets close enough, the centipede lunges, grabs hold with its many legs, and begins feeding, often targeting the neck and chest area first. Examination of captured bats has shown clear signs of a desperate struggle, but the centipede's hold proves too strong to escape. This isn't an isolated case either. Multiple bat species have turned up as prey in the same cave systems, suggesting this hunting method has become a reliable food source rather than a rare opportunity. An even more dramatic example comes from a small, isolated island in the South Pacific. On a patch of land off Norfolk Island, a large centipede species has become one of the dominant land predators, despite having no claws, no wings, and no size advantage over many of its targets. At night, these centipedes slip into the burrows of seabird chicks, using their venomous front legs to seize and subdue young birds that have no way to fight back. Researchers studying the island have estimated that these attacks account for a significant number of chick deaths every year, a staggering impact for a predator most people would dismiss as harmless. Because the island has no native land mammals to compete with, the centipede has essentially stepped into the role usually filled by foxes, rats, or other opportunistic predators elsewhere in the world. Interestingly, the same population doesn't rely solely on birds. Small lizards make up a large portion of their diet as well, showing just how comfortable this species has become with hunting vertebrates rather than sticking to the insects and invertebrates most people assume centipedes prefer. Perhaps the strangest twist in this entire story involves what happens after a snake actually manages to swallow one of these centipedes. You might expect that to be the end of the fight, but in at least one well-documented case, it was only the beginning of a much stranger ending. On a small island in North Macedonia, researchers came across the body of a young viper with something unusual protruding from a tear in its abdomen: the head and front legs of a centipede. It appeared the snake had swallowed the centipede while it was still alive, expecting an easy meal. Instead, the centipede kept fighting from the inside, using its legs and repeated venom strikes to tear through the snake's internal tissue in an attempt to escape. The resulting damage was severe enough that researchers believe it directly contributed to the snake's death. In other words, this particular predator didn't just resist being eaten. It managed to kill its killer from the inside out. That kind of resilience raises an uncomfortable question for any snake considering a centipede as its next meal. Most prey animals become helpless once they're swallowed, but a centipede's tough exoskeleton, strong legs, and venom delivery system don't simply switch off during digestion. If the centipede stays alive and mobile even briefly inside the snake's body, it has a real chance of causing fatal internal injuries before the snake's digestive system can finish the job. For a predator that relies on swallowing prey whole, that's a significant and rarely appreciated risk. Centipedes aren't the only invertebrates capable of turning the tables on snakes, either. In parts of Thailand, large forest scorpions have been observed attacking and killing small snakes, gripping them with powerful pincers and feeding for extended periods, sometimes dragging their subdued prey back toward a burrow. Spiders present an even more surprising case. Across several continents, researchers have documented snakes becoming tangled in strong, sticky webs, often those built by widow spiders and their close relatives. Once caught, a snake struggling only makes things worse, wrapping more silk around its body and limiting its ability to strike accurately. From there, the spider delivers repeated venomous bites, and paralysis sets in gradually as the snake continues to weaken. In some of these encounters, the size difference between predator and prey is almost comical, with spiders subduing snakes that outweigh them by an enormous margin. Venomous snake species aren't necessarily protected either, since their venom does them little good if they can't physically reach the creature attacking them. Taken together, these cases paint a much more complicated picture of who controls the food chain in certain ecosystems. Snakes are still formidable predators overall, but they're clearly not invincible, and their specialized design, built around striking with a venomous head, leaves them vulnerable to attackers that avoid that head entirely. Evolution rewarded snakes for being efficient, precise hunters, but that same efficiency becomes a weakness against multi-legged opponents willing to grip, wait, and strike repeatedly rather than relying on a single decisive blow. The wider implications of this research go beyond a handful of dramatic photographs and field reports. Scientists studying centipede venom have found that it contains a complex mix of compounds that target both muscle tissue and nerve signals, which is part of what makes it so effective at incapacitating prey quickly. That same complexity has caught the interest of medical researchers, some of whom are now investigating whether certain molecules in centipede venom could eventually contribute to new approaches for pain management. What began as an ecological curiosity, a small predator punching far above its weight class, may end up having relevance well beyond the forests, caves, and islands where these hunts take place. There's still a great deal scientists don't know. Researchers aren't yet sure how common these snake-killing events really are across different centipede species and habitats, or whether certain regions see this behavior far more often than others. Questions remain about whether snake populations might eventually adapt, through changes in behavior, timing, or even venom resistance, to better defend themselves against this threat. Climate shifts and changing habitats could also alter how often predators and prey cross paths in the first place, adding another layer of uncertainty to an already complex relationship. Answering these questions will likely take years of additional fieldwork, but the early findings alone have already changed how many researchers think about invertebrate predators. What makes this story so compelling isn't just the shock value of a small creature killing a much larger one. It's a reminder that assumptions about size, strength, and hierarchy in nature don't always hold up under close observation. A snake's speed, venom, and striking power mean very little if an opponent simply avoids the one weapon those advantages depend on. Nature doesn't always reward the biggest or most obviously dangerous animal in the encounter. Sometimes it rewards patience, precision, and a weapon nobody expected an arthropod to evolve in the first place. The centipede's rise from overlooked insect hunter to documented snake killer is a small but powerful example of how much we still have to learn about the creatures sharing our forests, caves, and islands. And it's a strong reminder that in the natural world, the most dangerous predator in the room isn't always the one you'd expect. If this look into one of nature's most unexpected rivalries surprised you, there's a good chance the next story in this series will too. Stick around, because the deeper you go into the world of predator and prey, the clearer it becomes that survival rarely goes the way you'd predict.